In 1968, a cafeteria in Mobile, Alabama served 11,000 plates in a single Sunday afternoon. The line stretched out the door and into the heat. Grandmothers in church hats, fathers in loosened ties, kids on tiptoe eyeing the dessert section. Today, that cafeteria is gone, and so are most of the meals that made it famous. Number 17 was so beloved that customers wrote letters begging for the recipe. Number 3 sold over 1 million plates a year at its peak. And number 1 was the quiet choice that fed more Southerners than anything else on the line. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten Southern cafeteria meals everyone grabbed before the tray lines vanished. Number 25, tomato aspic. It sat at the very front of the cold section, ruby red and trembling on a crisp lettuce leaf, crowned with a single dollop of mayonnaise, tomato juice, unflavored gelatin, a dash of Worcestershire, chopped celery, and sliced green olives, all set overnight in a ring mold and turned out shimmering onto chilled plates. The cafeteria counted it as a salad, and the church ladies treated it like one. It cost about 25 cents a slice in 1965, and the women who ordered it did so with the confidence of people who knew exactly what they liked. Children stared at it the way they stared at anything that wobbled. The flavor was savory and bright. Cold tomato sharpened by olive brine, and it paired with fried chicken better than anyone under 40 will ever believe. When gelatin salads fell out of fashion in the 1980s, aspic vanished from the line almost overnight, and the ring molds went to church rummage sales. Number 24, carrot and raisin salad. Every Southern cafeteria portioned this with an ice cream scoop, one perfect dome of shredded carrots, plump raisins, and sweet mayonnaise dressing set on a lettuce leaf like it was something precious. Some kitchens added crushed pineapple, some added a pinch of sugar. It cost about 20 cents, and it occupied a strange and wonderful place on the tray. It was sweet enough to be dessert, but it counted as a vegetable, and mothers across Georgia and Tennessee let children take it for exactly that reason. The carrots were shredded fresh every morning, never from a bag, and the raisins soaked up the dressing until they turned soft and jammy. It was cool and crunchy next to hot roast beef, and it disappeared from the plate before anything else did. Cafeteria managers ordered carrots by the 50-pound sack because of this one item. Today it survives only in funeral home fellowship halls and the memories of everyone who ever slid a tray past it. Number 23, pear salad. This one sounds like a joke until you remember that half the South was raised on it. One canned pear half, placed cut side up on a lettuce leaf, filled with a spoonful of mayonnaise, sprinkled with finely shredded sharp cheddar cheese, and finished with a maraschino cherry on top. That was the whole dish. It cost maybe 15 cents to make and sold for a quarter, and it moved by the hundreds every single day. The combination should not work. Sweet canned pear, tangy mayonnaise, salty cheese. But it did work, and generations of Southerners will defend it to this day with genuine emotion in their voices. It was the first thing many children ever chose for themselves on a cafeteria line because it looked like a tiny sundae. And then, sometime in the 1990s, it simply stopped appearing, dismissed as too strange, too dated, too Southern. The people who loved it never got a vote. Number 22, congealed lime salad. Somewhere between a salad and a dessert and a dare, this pale green wedge sat in the chilled case at nearly every cafeteria from Richmond to Baton Rouge. Lime gelatin, small curd cottage cheese, crushed pineapple, and chopped pecans, folded together and set in long sheet pans, then cut into perfect squares. Some kitchens folded in a little whipped topping until the whole thing turned the color of sea glass. It cost about 30 cents, and it was the pride of the cold line. The texture was the point, cool and silky, with the little pockets of pineapple and the crunch of pecans. It cut through a heavy plate of fried food like nothing else could. Ladies who lunched ordered it with cottage cheese on the side, doubling down. It was refreshing in a way that predated the word refreshing being used to sell things. When the congealed salad era ended, cafeterias lost an entire category of food, and the sheet pans were repurposed for banana pudding. Number 21, baked spaghetti. Not a bowl of noodles with sauce ladled over. A casserole. Spaghetti cooked soft, folded into a rich tomato and beef sauce, layered with cheese, baked in enormous hotel pans until it set firm, and cut into squares like lasagna. A square of baked spaghetti held its shape on the plate, stood up to the steam table for hours, and cost about 55 cents in 1970. The edges were the treasure. Where the cheese and sauce caramelized against the pan, you got chewy, crusty corners that people quietly requested from the servers they knew by name. The dish existed because cafeterias could not cook pasta to order, so they invented something better suited to the line and accidentally created a comfort food that Southern families copied for church suppers and funeral meals. The cafeterias that invented the format are almost all gone, but the casserole outlived them, which tells you exactly how good it was. Number 20, fried okra. The smell of it hit you before you even picked up a tray. Fresh okra, sliced into coins, dredged in seasoned cornmeal, and fried in batches all afternoon, so the steam table never held it long enough to go soft. A scoop cost about 20 cents, and children ate it like popcorn, which is exactly what the line ladies called it. Cafeteria fried okra was different from restaurant fried okra. It was not battered into heavy nuggets. It was light, cornmeal crusted, a little ragged, with crispy loose bits of fried cornmeal scattered through the scoop that everyone fought over. In summer, when Georgia and Mississippi okra came in by the crate, the cafeterias fried hundreds of pounds a week. It converted okra skeptics by the thousands because frying solved the texture problem that boiling created. When the tray lines vanished, fried okra retreated to meat and threes and family reunions. But for 40 years, the cafeteria was where most Southern kids tasted it first. Number 19, liver and onions. Every cafeteria had a liver day, usually Wednesday, and the people who loved it planned their entire week around it. Thin slices of beef liver, dredged in flour, seared fast on a flat top, and smothered under a pile of onions, cooked slow in the drippings until they turned sweet and golden brown. It sold for about 89 cents with 2 vegetables, and the portion of the line where it sat divided humanity into 2 camps that never once understood each other. Done right, and the cafeterias did it right. The liver was tender and mild, the crust golden, the onions doing half the work. It was one of the most nutritious things on the entire line, loaded with iron and B12, and the older customers who grew up during the Depression knew it. They had eaten liver when it cost 15 cents a pound, and steak was a rumor. When they stopped coming, the liver stopped selling, and one by one the cafeterias quietly took it off the menu. Nobody under 50 noticed. First pattern break. Here is what people forget about the tray line itself. The desserts came first. That was not an accident. Morrison's, founded in Mobile, Alabama in 1920, figured out that if a customer put a slice of pie on the tray at the start of the line, they had committed to it, and they would build the rest of the meal around it. Piccadilly in Baton Rouge did the same. So did Luby's in Texas, and Wyatt's in Dallas, and Britling's in Birmingham, and S&S in Georgia. You slid your tray down those chrome rails past 100 feet of food, and the ladies behind the glass, in their hairnets and white uniforms, called you baby and asked if you wanted gravy on that, and the answer was always yes. At the end stood the carver in his tall paper hat, slicing roast beef under a heat lamp. Sweet tea came in those pebbled amber tumblers, refilled without asking, and if your hands were full, a tray carrier walked your supper to the table for a dime tip. It was not fast food, it was slow food, served fast by people who knew your name. Number 18, squash casserole. If Southern cafeteria cooking had a flag, it would be a steam table pan of squash casserole. Yellow summer squash, sliced and simmered with onions until soft, folded with eggs, cheese, and a little mayonnaise or cream of chicken soup, topped with crushed buttery crackers and baked until the top turned deep golden and the edges bubbled. A scoop cost about 25 cents as a vegetable choice, and it converted more squash haters than any dish in Southern history. The genius was texture. The squash melted into something custardy and rich. The cheese stitched it together, and the cracker topping gave you crunch in every bite. In July, when squash flooded in from farms across the South, cafeterias baked it by the hundreds of pounds. Families begged for the recipe. Some cafeterias printed recipe cards just to stop the letters. It survives at Thanksgiving tables and church potlucks. But the everyday version, available every single day of the year, 11:30 to 8, died with the tray lines. Number 17, stewed tomatoes. This is the one people wrote letters about. Canned tomatoes, simmered low with butter, sugar, salt, and torn pieces of white bread, stirred in until the whole thing thickened into something between a vegetable and a bread pudding. Sweet, tangy, soft, and completely impossible to stop eating. It cost about 20 cents a scoop, and it looked like nothing at all sitting in the pan, which is why first-timers passed it by for years until somebody made them try it. The bread was the secret. It soaked up the tomato liquid and turned silky, thickening the dish without flour, stretching a 10-cent can of tomatoes into a vegetable that fed a dozen people. It was Depression cooking that never bothered to change its name, sitting right there on a modern steam table into the 1990s. Customers requested the recipe so often that several cafeteria chains eventually published it. People still make it from those clippings, yellowed and taped inside cabinet doors, because the restaurants that served it no longer exist. Number 16, macaroni and cheese, counted as a vegetable. Only in the South did this make perfect sense, and nobody ever apologized for it. On the printed menu board, right there between the turnip greens and the squash casserole, sat macaroni and cheese, listed as a vegetable choice, 25 cents. And this was not the loose, saucy kind. Cafeteria mac and cheese was baked custard style. Elbow macaroni, eggs, milk, and pounds of sharp cheddar baked in deep pans until it's set firm enough to cut into squares with a browned cheese crust across the top that people specifically requested. The corner pieces were currency. Servers saved them for regulars. Children ordered it as their vegetable, their meat, and if allowed, their dessert. When the cafeterias closed, Southern families discovered the boxed stuff was not the same, and an entire generation started calling their grandmothers asking how much egg goes in. Number 15, fried chicken livers. For 79 cents, you got a pile of them. Chicken livers soaked in buttermilk, dredged in seasoned flour, and fried until the crust shattered and the inside stayed creamy, served with a side of cream gravy or hot sauce, depending on which state you were standing in. They were the best value on the entire line, protein-rich and dirt cheap. And the people who ordered them were almost always the oldest people in the building. They knew something. Livers were what you ate when you grew up poor and found out that the cheapest thing at the butcher was also one of the best things, if you knew what to do with it. The cafeterias knew what to do with it. Fried fresh in small batches, never held long, they had a devoted following that never once grew younger. It was a dish on a countdown from the day it was born. The last Southern cafeterias still fry them for a dwindling, loyal, gray-haired line. When those customers go, the livers go with them. Number 14, Salisbury steak with onion gravy. The cafeteria called it Salisbury steak. Your grandmother called it hamburger steak. Either way, it was the workhorse of the hot line. A thick oval patty of seasoned ground beef, seared hard on the flat top, then smothered in brown gravy loaded with soft, cooked onions and held on the steam table, where it did something magical. It got better. The gravy soaked into the beef, the onions melted, and by 6 in the evening, the Salisbury steak was deeper and richer than it had been at noon. It sold for about 75 cents with 2 sides and a roll, and it fed working men, widows, and every child who was not brave enough for the liver. Invented as health food in the 1800s by a doctor named Salisbury, it reached its true and final form under cafeteria heat lamps in the South, ladled with gravy by a woman who asked if you wanted extra. You did. Second pattern break. Here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. The cafeterias did not die because the food got worse. They died because the food was too good to be profitable. Think about what a Southern cafeteria actually did. 40 to 60 items cooked from scratch, twice a day, every day. Real roast beef carved by hand. Vegetables trimmed that morning. Pies made in-house by women who had been making them for 30 years. That takes an army of skilled cooks, and skilled cooks cost money. Fast food figured out how to serve a meal with 3 teenagers and a fryer. Buffets figured out how to skip the servers entirely. The malls emptied out. And the customers who understood what a tray line was worth got older every year while their grandchildren drove past to somewhere with a drive-through. Morrison's was absorbed by Piccadilly in 1998. Luby's shrank from more than 200 locations to a handful. Wyatt's, Britling's, Blue Boar, Furs, one by one, gone. We did not lose those meals because we stopped loving them. We lost them because scratch cooking at scale stopped making financial sense in America. That should bother you more than it does. Number 13, turnip greens with pot liquor. Every proper cafeteria kept a bottle of pepper sauce on every single table, and it existed for one reason: the greens. Turnip greens, cooked low and slow for hours with smoked pork until they collapsed into dark, silky ribbons swimming in pot liquor, that salty, smoky, mineral-rich broth at the bottom of the pan. A scoop cost 20 cents, and the server always asked the important question: "You want some of that juice, baby?" The answer separated tourists from natives. The pot liquor was for the cornbread, crumbled straight in until it drank up every drop. Nutritionists eventually discovered that greens cooked this way still deliver remarkable amounts of calcium, iron, and folate, and that the pot air holds the vitamins that cooking pulls out of the leaves. The cooks in those cafeteria kitchens never read the studies. They just knew you served the greens with the juice, the way their mothers did, because throwing away the best part was something no Southerner would ever do. Number 12, cornbread, dressing with giblet gravy. In most of America, dressing appears one day a year. In the Southern cafeteria, it was on the line every single day, sitting next to the baked chicken like it was nothing special, which is the most Southern flex in history. Crumbled cornbread and biscuits, celery, onion, sage, and rich chicken stock, baked in deep pans until the top crisped and the inside stayed soft as spoon bread. Over the top went giblet gravy, thick and pale, studded with chopped boiled egg and the finely chopped giblets that gave it a depth no jar has ever touched. The plate cost about 85 cents with chicken, and for the widows and widowers who ate at the cafeteria 3 nights a week, it meant Thanksgiving was never more than a tray slide away. That was not a small thing. For a person eating alone, a plate of dressing and gravy on an ordinary Tuesday in March was proof that comfort did not have to wait for a holiday. Number 11. Fried catfish with hush puppies. Friday was fish day across the entire South, and the cafeterias honored it like a covenant. Whole catfish fillets, dredged in seasoned cornmeal, fried until the crust turned deep gold and crackled when the server lifted it with tongs, served with a paper cup of tartar sauce, a wedge of lemon, and 2 or 3 hush puppies, crisp outside and steamy with onion inside. The plate ran about $1 in 1972, and on Fridays the line stretched double. Cafeteria catfish was farm-raised, delivered fresh, and fried in small batches all evening, which meant it never sat long enough to lose its crunch. The hush puppies came from the same cornmeal, fried in the same oil, and children counted them the way they counted Christmas presents. For families who could not afford the fish camp on the river, Friday at the cafeteria was the fish camp, with air conditioning and sweet tea. When the tray lines closed, Friday lost something in 100 southern towns, and everybody felt it. Number 10. Chicken and dumplings. Not the fluffy dropped kind, the southern kind. Flat, rolled dumplings cut into strips and simmered in rich chicken broth until they turned silky and slick, tangled up with shreds of stewed hen, the whole thing thick enough to hold a spoon upright. It sold for about 80 cents, and it was the dish the cafeterias were judged by. Any kitchen can fry a piece of chicken. Dumplings take a hand. The cooks rolled the dough out on floured steel tables at dawn, cut it with pizza wheels, and dropped it into stock that had been simmering since the night before. Old hens, too tough to fry, gave that broth a depth young chickens never could, which was Depression arithmetic still paying dividends 50 years later. People ordered chicken and dumplings when they were sick, when they were sad, when it was raining. It was the closest thing on the line to being cooked for by your own grandmother, and for a few dimes, you could have it any day you needed it. Number 9. Ambrosia. The name means food of the gods, and no one in the South ever found that funny, because it was accurate. Fresh orange sections, cut by hand, folded with shredded coconut, pineapple, and maraschino cherries, chilled overnight until the juices mingled into a syrup that tasted like a Florida grove in December. Some cafeterias added tiny marshmallows. Purists complained, then ate it anyway. It sat in the cold section in little glass dishes for about 25 cents. Fruit, so it was practically health food. Sweet, so it was basically dessert. Mothers approved it, children requested it, and everybody won. Real ambrosia takes real knife work, dozens of oranges sectioned by hand every morning, and that labor is exactly why it disappeared. Canned fruit cocktail is not ambrosia. Whipped topping folded with pudding mix is not ambrosia. The real thing died with the cafeteria fruit station, and most people under 40 have never once tasted it. Number 8. Deviled eggs. 2 halves sitting on a lettuce leaf, dusted with paprika, 15 cents. The cafeteria deviled egg was not fancy. Yolks mashed with mayonnaise, yellow mustard, a splash of pickle juice, piped back into the whites by women who could fill 300 halves before the lunch rush without breaking one. And they sold out, every day. There is something about a deviled egg made by someone else that tastes better than any you make at home, and the entire South knows it. They sat right where your tray started, protein for the price of a gumball, a little salty, a little tangy, gone in 4 bites. When cafeterias started cutting labor in the 1990s, hand-piped deviled eggs were among the first casualties because 15 cents could not cover the hands that made them. The eggs left the line quietly. The regulars noticed immediately. Number 17, meatloaf with tomato glaze and green beans. Third pattern break. Here is what the cafeteria really was, underneath the steam and the chrome. It was the most democratic room in the South. The judge and the janitor stood in the same line, slid the same trays, and ate the same fried okra because there was no table service to buy your way into and no wrong side of the room. For widows and widowers, the 4:30 supper crowd was a social life. They came early, sat at the same tables, and ate around people instead of alone at a kitchen table built for a family that had scattered. For children, the tray line was the first taste of independence anyone ever handed them. You chose your own vegetable, your own dessert, your own bottle of milk, consequences and all. And for families climbing out of hard times, the cafeteria was a restaurant they could actually afford. White tablecloth manners at blue-collar prices. Sunday after church, the whole town was in that line, and everybody saw everybody. We did not just lose a menu when the tray lines vanished. We lost one of the last rooms where the whole community ate the same supper. Number 7, sweet potato casserole. On the line, it glowed. Mashed sweet potatoes whipped with butter, eggs, and vanilla until they turned to velvet, spread into pans, and finished one of two ways, depending on the house. Toasted marshmallows, burnished and golden, or the praline topping, brown sugar, and pecans baked into a candy crust. A scoop cost 25 cents and counted gloriously as a vegetable. The marshmallow versus praline debate divided families for decades and was never settled, which is why the smartest cafeterias simply made both. Like the dressing, this was holiday food available every ordinary day, and that mattered to people in ways the menu board never captured. Sweet potatoes were cheap, southern-grown, and stored all winter, which made this one of the most profitable pans in the kitchen and one of the most loved items on the line at the same time. That combination is rare. The cafeterias had it every day for 50 years, and then it was gone. Number 6, yeast rolls. At the end of the line, past the meats and the vegetables, stood the bread station, and at the bread station stood the roll lady, and the roll lady held tongs, and with those tongs she placed onto your plate a yeast roll the size of a softball, brushed with melted butter, so light it seemed to hover. Rolls were a nickel, sometimes free with a meat, and no item on the entire line generated more loyalty. The dough was made in-house every morning, proofed in racks that perfumed the whole kitchen, and baked in waves timed to the rushes so that a roll never reached a tray more than minutes out of the oven. Beside them sat the cornbread, and at the Texas and Louisiana houses, jalapeno cornbread muffins studded with peppers and corn that people ordered by the bagful to take home. Customers came for the roast beef. They came back for the rolls. Ask anyone who ever ate at one of these places what they miss, and watch how fast the bread comes up. Number 5, egg custard pie. The humblest pie in the case, and the one the old-timers went for first. Eggs, milk, sugar, vanilla, and a whisper of nutmeg, baked slow in a plain crust until the custard set into a pale, trembling silk. A slice cost 20 cents, and it barely moved when the server lifted it, just a gentle shiver that told you it was made right. This was sick-bed food, the pie mothers made when appetites were fragile, and the cafeteria kept it on the line every day for anyone who needed something gentle. It was also nearly impossible to make well at scale. custard curdles when rushed, weeps when overbaked, and the cafeteria bakers who could pull 50 perfect pies a day out of those ovens were artists who were never once called artists. When they retired, their replacements were handed frozen pies and a delivery schedule. The old customers took one bite, said nothing, and switched to the pecan. Number 4, chess pie. Nobody agrees on the name. Some say it comes from just pie, said in a southern accent. Some say it comes from the pie chest, where it kept without refrigeration. What everyone agrees on is the recipe, which reads like a pantry apology and eats like a miracle. Sugar, butter, eggs, a spoonful of cornmeal, a splash of vinegar, baked until the top forms a thin, crackling sugar crust over a dense, gooey, buttery center. It is the pie you make when you have nothing, which is exactly why the South perfected it and exactly why the cafeterias, staffed by cooks raised on nothing, made it better than anyone. A slice ran 20 cents. The vinegar was the secret, cutting the sweetness just enough to make a second slice feel reasonable. Chess pie never had a holiday, never had a season, never had a marketing budget. It just sat in the dessert case at the front of the line, quietly outselling flashier pies for the better part of a century. Number 3, chicken fried steak. In Texas and across the whole Cafeteria South, this was the king of the line. A cube steak, pounded thin, double-dredged in seasoned flour, fried until the crust rippled into golden shale, and blanketed in black pepper cream gravy, ladled on by the server with a heavy hand, if you smiled. At its peak, the big cafeteria chains sold this by the hundreds of thousands of plates a year, over 1 million across a good chain in a good year, and it was the single dish entire families ordered without ever looking at the rest of the menu. It cost about $1 with 2 vegetables and a roll. Real chicken fried steak takes handwork, and the cafeterias did it the hard way for decades because customers could taste the difference between hand-breaded and factory-breaded from across the room. It was cheap beef, transformed by labor and gravy into something people drove 40 minutes for. That is the whole story of Southern cooking in one plate. Number 2, banana pudding. It sat at the front of the line, first thing your eyes landed on, in individual glass dishes, and that placement was a loaded weapon. Layers of vanilla custard made from scratch in steam kettles, sliced ripe bananas, and vanilla wafers gone soft and cake-like, crowned with a swirl of meringue toasted golden under the broiler. It cost $0.25, and it went on the tray before the meat, before the vegetables, before you had decided anything else about your life. Cafeteria banana pudding was custard-based, never instant, never whipped topping, and the difference is the difference between a photograph of your grandmother and your grandmother. The wafers mattered too. They needed hours to soften into that dense, vanilla-soaked layer, which meant the pudding was built in the morning for the evening, planned like everything else in those kitchens. Ask any Southerner to name the dessert they miss most from the tray lines, and you will not get a variety of answers. You will get this one. Number 1, the vegetable plate. Number 1 is not a recipe. It is a choice, and it fed more Southerners than anything else on the line. 3 vegetables and a bread, or 4 and a bread, no meat, for about 85 cents. Turnip greens, mac and cheese, squash casserole, black-eyed peas, a wedge of cornbread. On paper, it was the budget option. On the tray, it was a feast, because in the South, the vegetables were never sides. They were the point, cooked with as much care and pork and patience as anything under the heat lamps. And here is the quiet dignity of it. Nobody could tell whether you ordered the vegetable plate because you loved it or because it was all you could afford. And the servers ladled it with the same generosity either way. the retired teacher stretching a pension, and the doctor who just liked greens ate the same supper at neighboring tables. That was the whole promise of the Southern cafeteria on a single plate. Everybody eats. Everybody eats well. Nobody has to explain. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week. The squash casserole, the stewed tomatoes, the real banana pudding with real custard. Or better, find one of the last cafeterias still running a tray line, drive there, and slide a tray down the rails while you still can. Then come back and tell me what you ordered. I want to know if the chicken fried steak gets more love than the banana pudding. I want to know if anyone else's grandmother put a pear half on a lettuce leaf and called it salad. Because these were not just meals. They were the last suppers of a South that ate together, and somebody should remember what was on the tray.